The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Aaliyah Carter adjusted the collar of her blouse, her fingers brushing against the delicate gold necklace her grandmother had given her. The office of Vance and Mercer Financial Group was always too cold, the air conditioning set to a temperature that made her skin prickle. But today, the chill in the air had nothing to do with the thermostat. She had been called into her boss's office, again. Aaliyah exhaled slowly, smoothing her skirt before knocking on the frosted glass door. "Come in," came the sharp, impatient voice of Richard Vance. Richard sat behind his massive mahogany desk, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, his tailored suit costing more than Aaliyah's monthly rent. He didn't look up as she entered, instead continuing to scribble something on a document. The silence stretched, deliberate, designed to make her uncomfortable. Aaliyah refused to fidget. She had worked here for 3 years, 3 years of being passed over for promotions, of watching less qualified colleagues advance while she remained stagnant. 3 years of Richard's thinly veiled disdain, the way his lip curled when she spoke in meetings, the way he forgot her name more times than she could count. Finally, he set down his pen and leaned back, his cold blue eyes locking onto hers. "Aaliyah," he said, her name sounding like an insult. "Sit." She sat. "I'll cut to the chase," Richard said, folding his hands. "Your performance has been lacking." Aaliyah's jaw tightened. She had closed more accounts than anyone else on the team last quarter. She had stayed late, come in early, done everything asked of her and then some. "I'm not sure what you mean, Mr. Vance," she said carefully. Your reports are fine," he interrupted. "But this company has standards. Image matters. And frankly, you don't fit the culture here." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Aaliyah felt her pulse quicken. She had heard this before, the coded language, the excuses that masked the truth. Not a good fit. Not the right vibe. Doesn't align with our values. Asterisk. She knew what he really meant. "Is this about the Thompson account?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "Because I was the one who salvaged it after Daniel mishandled." "This isn't about one account," Richard snapped. "It's about the bigger picture. And the reality is, we've decided to go in a different direction." Aaliyah's stomach dropped. "You're letting me go?" Richard shrugged, as if it were nothing. "Effective immediately. HR has your severance paperwork ready." She stared at him, the injustice of it burning in her chest. She had given this company everything. And for what? "You can't do this," she said quietly. Richard smirked. "I just did." Aaliyah stood, her hands trembling not from fear but from fury. She leaned forward, her voice low and dangerous. "You're making a mistake," Richard laughed. A cruel, dismissive sound. "I don't think so. Security will escort you out." The walk back to her desk was a blur. Colleagues avoided her gaze, pretending not to notice as she packed her things. Daniel, the golden boy who had stolen her ideas more than once, had the audacity to smirk. Aaliyah ignored them all. She placed the framed photo of her parents into the box, her fingers lingering on the glass. They had sacrificed so much for her to get here. And now, she had nothing. As she stepped into the elevator, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She answered. "Aaliyah Carter?" a smooth, unfamiliar voice asked. "Yes? This is Marcus Whitmore. I think it's time we talked." Aaliyah frowned. "About what?" "About who you really are." The elevator doors slid open to the lobby, and her life was about to change forever. Aaliyah stood frozen in the lobby, the phone pressed tightly against her ear. The voice on the other end, Marcus Whitmore, sounded calm, assured, as if he already knew everything about her. "Who I really am," she repeated, her grip tightening on the box of her belongings. "What is that supposed to mean?" A low chuckle came through the line. "Let's just say Richard Vance isn't the only one who's been keeping secrets." Her pulse spiked. How did this stranger know about Richard? About what had just happened? "I don't have time for games," she snapped. "This isn't a game," Marcus replied smoothly. "Meet me at the Oakmont. 1 hour, and bring that necklace you're wearing." The line went dead. Aaliyah's free hand instinctively flew to her grandmother's necklacia, delicate gold chain with a small engraved pendant. It had been in her family for generations, passed down from mother to daughter. How did this man know about it? She stepped out of the building, the midday sun glaring down on her. The dismissal should have left her defeated, but instead, something burned inside her anger. Yes, but also curiosity. She had nothing to lose. The Oakmont was an upscale lounge, all dark wood and low lighting, the kind of place where business deals were made in hushed tones. Aaliyah had been here once before, for a company event Richard had thrown last year. The memory made her jaw clench. She spotted him immediately. Marcus Whitmore sat in a secluded booth, his tailored navy suit and confident posture marking him as a man who was used to power. He was older than she expected, mid-50s, perhaps with sharp features and salt and pepper hair. But it was his eyes that caught her off guard. They were the same deep brown as hers. "Aaliyah," he said, standing as she approached. "I'm glad you came." She didn't start talking. Marcus smirked, unfazed by her tone. "Direct. I like that." He gestured to the seat across from him. "Please." Reluctantly she sat, her fingers brushing the pendant at her throat. "You want to know why Richard Vance fired you today?" Marcus leaned forward. "It's because he's afraid." Aaliyah scoffed. "Afraid of what? Me? Not just you." His gaze flicked to her necklace. "Afraid of who you represent?" She frowned. "What are you talking about?" Marcus exhaled slowly, as if deciding how much to reveal. Then he reached into his jacket and slid a photograph across the table. It was old, faded at the edges. A black and white image of a regal-looking woman in an elegant dress, standing in front of a sprawling estate. Around her neck was a necklace, the same one Aaliyah wore now. Aaliyah's breath caught. "That's Eleanor Whitmore," Marcus said. "My grandmother, your great-grandmother." The world tilted. Aaliyah shook her head. My family doesn't. We don't have any connection to wealth? To power?" Marcus arched a brow. "That's what you were raised to believe, wasn't it?" Her mind raced. Her parents had always been private about their past, changing the subject whenever she asked about relatives beyond her grandparents. She had assumed it was because there wasn't much to tell, that they came from humble beginnings. But this, Marcus tapped the photo. Eleanor was one of the wealthiest black women in the country during her time. She built an imperial estate, finance, even political influence. But after her death, her fortune was stolen. Aaliyah's stomach twisted. By who? Marcus's expression darkened. By the families who couldn't stand the idea of a black woman with that kind of power. The Vances were one of them. Richard Vance, Aaliyah's hands trembled. "You're telling me Richard fired me because he recognized that necklace?" Marcus cut in. "Because he knows exactly who you are. And if the truth comes out, his family loses everything." Aaliyah sat back, her mind reeling. It was too much. Too insane. And yet, she thought of the way Richard had looked at her, not just with disdain, but with something else. Fear. Marcus leaned closer. "The Whitmore fortune still exists. Hidden, tied up in legal battles, but yours by right. And with it, the power to bring down the people who destroyed our family." Aaliyah met his gaze. "Why now? Why tell me this now?" "Because today proved you're ready," Marcus said simply. "You stood up to Richard Vance. You didn't back down. That's the fire this family needs." A silence stretched between them. Then Aaliyah reached for the photograph, her fingers tracing the image of Eleanor Whitmore, her great-grandmother. A woman of power, a woman of legacy, a woman whose enemies had tried to erase her. A slow, dangerous smile curved Aaliyah's lips. "Tell me what I need to do." The weight of Marcus's revelation pressed against Aaliyah's chest as she sat in the back of the sleek black town car he had summoned. The city blurred past the tinted windows, but her mind was locked onto one thing. Richard Vance knew who she was. And he had been terrified of her. Marcus handed her a thick manila folder. "Start with this." Aaliyah flipped it open. Inside were legal documents, old newspaper clippings, and black and white photographs of a grand estate, Whitmore Manor, its towering columns and sprawling gardens, a stark contrast to the modest home she had grown up in. "This was ours," she whispered. "Is ours," Marcus corrected. "The courts tied it up in decades of bureaucratic red tape, but the deed still carries Eleanor's name." He tapped a faded legal document. "And now, yours." Aaliyah's breath hitched. She had spent her life believing her family had nothing. But all this time, why didn't my parents tell me? Marcus's jaw tightened. They were protecting you. After Eleanor's death, the families who stole from us made sure anyone who challenged them disappeared. His voice dropped. Your parents fled, changed their names. They wanted you to have a normal life. A normal life. One where she worked twice as hard for half the recognition. One where men like Richard Vance could discard her without consequence. A fire ignited in her gut. What's the plan? Marcus smirked. First, we prove the Vance family's fraud. Then, we take back what's ours. He pulled out another file, this one labeled Vance and Mercer. Internal records. Aaliyah's eyes widened. How did you get this? Let's just say, not everyone at that company is loyal to Richard. She scanned the document shell companies, offshore accounts, falsified transactions. The evidence of corruption was staggering. This is enough to bury him, she murmured. Not yet. Marcus leaned in. Richard's just the puppet. We need the man pulling the string. Sh's father, Harrison Vance. The name sent a chill down Aaliyah's spine. Harrison Vance was a legend in the financial world. Ruthless. Untouchable. He's the one who orchestrated the theft of our fortune, Marcus said. And he's hosting a gala at his estate next week. Aaliyah's grip tightened on the file. You want me to go? I want you to walk in there as what you area Whitmore. His gaze flicked to her necklace. And I want you to watch Harrison Vance's face when he realizes you know the truth. The next 7 days passed in a whirlwind. Marcus arranged for Aaliyah to be outfitted in a custom gown deep emerald green, the same shade Eleanor had worn in her most famous portrait. He hired a team to prepare her, etiquette coaches, historians, even a former federal prosecutor to brief her on the Vance family's crimes. But the most surreal moment came when they visited Whitmore Manor. The estate had fallen into disrepair, its grand halls now coated in dust, its gardens overgrown. But as Aaliyah stepped into the foyer, she felt it, a connection. This was her legacy, and she was about to reclaim it. The night of the gala arrived. Aaliyah stood before the floor-length mirror in her suite, adjusting the necklace, Eleanor's asterisk necklace, against her skin. The emerald gown shimmered under the light, the cut elegant yet commanding. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his approving smile sharpening into something fiercer. Ready? Aaliyah met his gaze in the mirror. Let's go ruin a Vance. The Vance estate was a monument to excess: gold-trimmed balconies, marble floors, chandeliers that dripped with crystals. The cream of high society mingled beneath them, their laughter ringing hollow in Aaliyah's ears. Then she saw him. Harrison Vance. Asterisk. The patriarch stood at the center of the room, his silver hair and tailored tuxedo the picture of old money elegance. But his eyes, cold and calculating, betrayed the predator beneath. Marcus guided her forward. Remember, hold your head high. You belong here. Aaliyah inhaled deeply, then stepped into the crowd. Whispers followed her, heads turned. And then, as if sensing the shift in the room, Harrison Vance looked up. Their eyes locked. For a fraction of a second, his polished mask slip-shock, then fear, flashing across his face. Aaliyah smiled. He recognizes me. Harrison recovered quickly, his expression smoothing into polite curiosity as he excused himself from his guests and strode toward her. I don't believe we've met, he said, his voice smooth as silk. Aaliyah extended her hand, the pendant at her throat gleaming under the chandelier light. Aaliyah Whitmore, she said, savoring the name. But I think you already knew that. Harrison's grip on her hand tightened imperceptibly. Then the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the grand ballroom. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by nervous laughter and murmured confusion. Aaliyah stood frozen, Harrison Vance's grip still locked around her hand like a vice. Then whispers. Asterisk. What's happening? Asterisk. Asterisk. Just a power surge, surely. Asterisk. A sharp click echoed through the room as emergency lights flickered on, casting an eerie glow over the guests. Harrison's face was a mask of forced calm, but his eyes burned with something dangerous. You, he hissed, low enough that only Aaliyah could hear. You have no right to be here. Aaliyah yanked her hand free. I have every right. Before he could respond, a voice boomed across the room. Asterisk, ladies and gentlemen. Asterisk all heads turned toward the sorcerer-man, standing atop the grand staircase, a microphone in hand. He wore the uniform of the event staff, but his stance was too commanding, his voice too deliberate. Asterisk. Apologies for the interruption. Asterisk, he continued, his tone dripping with mock courtesy. Asterisk. But we have a special announcement. Asterisk. Aaliyah's pulse spiked. This wasn't part of the plan. Asterisk. Marcus was nowhere in sight. The man on the stairs reached into his jacket and pulled out a remote. With a press of a button, the massive projector screen behind him, meant for showcasing Vance family achievements, flashed to life. A document appeared. A deed. Asterisk. The room erupted in murmurs. Harrison Vance went pale. Aaliyah recognized it instantly, the same deed Marcus had shown her days ago. Whitmore Manor. Asterisk. The man smirked. Asterisk. For those unfamiliar, this is the legal deed to one of the most storied estates in the state, stolen from its rightful owners over 50 years ago. Asterisk. He paused, letting the words sink in. Asterisk. And signed by none other than Harrison Vance's father. Asterisk. Harrison moved like a viper, shoving through the crowd toward the stairs. This is an outrage. Security! But the man wasn't finished. Another click, and the screen changed, this time to a series of bank records, all bearing the Vance family seal. Asterisk. And these, asterisk, he announced, asterisk, are the offshore accounts where the Whitmore fortune was funneled after Eleanor Whitmore's mysterious death. Asterisk. The crowd's murmurs turned to outright shock. Aaliyah's breath came fast. This was more than exposure, this was destruction. Asterisk. Harrison reached the stairs, his face twisted in fury. Who the hell are you? The man smiled and reached up and peeled off the prosthetic makeup disguising his face. Marcus, asterisk, Marcus Whitmore, he said, loud enough for the room to hear. Eleanor's grandson. And her, he pointed straight at Aaliyah, her great-granddaughter, asterisk. Every head in the room swiveled toward her. Aaliyah stood tall, the pendant at her throat gleaming like a declaration of war. Harrison Vance looked between them, his composure cracking. This is slander. You have no proof. Oh, but we do. Marcus tossed a flash drive into the crowd. Enough to bury you and that pathetic son of yours. Chaos erupted. Guests scrambled for the doors. Reporters who had been invited to cover the Galano had their cameras trained on Harrison's unraveling. Aaliyah should have felt triumphant. But then she saw him, asterisk, Richard Vance, pushing through the crowd toward her, his face a twisted mix of rage and terror. You bitch, he snarled, grabbing her arm. You think you can ruin us? Aaliyah twisted free. I didn't have to, you did that yourselves. Richard's hand flew back, whether to strike her or grab her again. She'd never know. Because in that moment, Marcus was there, shoving him back with a force that sent Richard stumbling into a champagne tower. Glass shattered. People screamed. And then sirens. Asterisk. Harrison's head snapped toward the entrance. Number. The doors burst open. Uniformed officers streamed in, flanked by federal agents. Harrison Vance, one announced. You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit theft. The room exploded in noise. Aaliyah watched, numb, as Harrison was dragged away in handcuffs, his shouts of protest drowned out by the flashing lights and shouting reporters. Richard, drenched in champagne, could only stare in horror. Marcus appeared at Aaliyah's side, his voice low. It's done. But Aaliyah didn't celebrate. Because across the room, locked in the gaze of a single camera, she saw something far more powerful than vengeance. Recognition. Asterisk. The world now knew who she was. And more importantly, who they'd stolen from. Asterisk. The flashing lights of police cruisers painted the Vance estate in streaks of red and blue as Aaliyah stepped onto the manicured lawn, the cool night air sharp against her skin. Reporters swarmed the scene, their shouted questions blending into a cacophony of noise. Asterisk. Miss Whitmore, is it true you're the rightful heir to the Whitmore fortune? Asterisk. Asterisk. Did you know about the Vance family's crimes before tonight? Asterisk. Asterisk. What happens now? Asterisk. Marcus materialized beside her, steering her firmly toward a waiting town car. Don't answer them, he murmured. Not yet. Aaliyah barely heard him. Her mind was still replaying the moment Harrison Vance had been dragged away in handcuffs. His empire crumbling in front of high society's elite. Justice, asterisk. The word should have tasted sweet, but as the car door closed behind her, sealing her away from the chaos, a different feeling settled in her chest, unease. Asterisk. She turned to Marcus. You never told me the feds were involved. His expression was unreadable in the dim interior light. I didn't know if they'd moved tonight. The evidence had to be airtight. And is it? A slow, satisfied smile curled his lips. Enough to put Harrison away for the rest of his miserable life. The car pulled away from the estate, leaving the spectacle behind. Aaliyah stared out the window, watching the shadows of the grand iron gates pass by. So what now? She asked. Now, Marcus said, pulling out a sleek tablet. We take back what's ours. He handed it to her. On the screen was a live news feed. Vance and Mercer Financial Group stocks were plummeting. Asterisk. Aaliyah's breath caught. How much did they lose? $500 million. And counting. Marcus leaned back. By morning the board will be scrambling to distance themselves from the Vance name. And we will be there to pick up the pieces. Aaliyah's fingers tightened around the tablet. You want to buy the company? I want you to buy it. Her head snapped up. Marcus's gaze was steady. It was built with Whitmore money. It should be yours. The enormity of it crashed over her. Just hours ago, she'd been an employee Richard Vance had tossed aside. Now she could own it. The thought was intoxicating and terrifying. Aaliyah exhaled sharply. I need time. You have until sunrise. Marcus tapped the tablet, pulling up another filia list of names. The board's emergency meeting is at 8 a.m. If you're going to make a move, it has to be then. She studied the names, powerful men and women, all loyal to Harrison until tonight. One stood out. Daniel Reeves, asterisk. Her stomach twisted. Daniel had been Richard's golden boy, the one who'd stolen her ideas and smirked as she packed her desk. Now, he was scrambling to save his career. Aaliyah smiled. Tell me what I need to do. The next few hours passed in a blur. Marcus's team worked through the night lawyers drafting acquisition proposals, financiers securing lines of credit, PR specialists preparing statements. Aaliyah, meanwhile, was given a crash course in corporate warfare. Most of the board will fold if you pressure them right, Marcus explained, pointing to the list. But these three? He circled names. They're loyalists. They'll fight. Then we remove them, Aaliyah said simply. Marcus raised a brow. Just like that? She met his gaze. They benefited from stolen money. I want them gone. Asterisk. A flicker of approval crossed his face. Good. By 6 a.m., the plan was set. By 7 a.m., Aaliyah stood in front of a full-length mirror, adjusting the cuffs of her tailored blazer. The emerald gown from the gala was gone, replaced by a sharp, commanding ensemble, CEO attire. Marcus appeared in the doorway, holding out a small velvet box. For luck, he said. Aaliyah opened it. Inside was a pair of cufflinks engraved, with the Whitmore family crest. Her throat tightened. Thank you, she whispered. Marcus shook his head. Don't thank me yet. He checked his watch. It's time. The boardroom of Vance and Mercer was nothing like Aaliyah remembered. The last time she'd been here, she'd been presenting a proposal loan Richard had dismissed without a second glance. Now the room fell silent as she walked in. Daniel Reeves, mid-panic at the head of the table, went pale. Aaliyah? His voice cracked. What the hell are you, Miss Whitmore? Marcus corrected smoothly, stepping in behind her. Is here to make an offer. Daniel's eyes darted between them. This is a private meeting. You can't just... Actually, Aaliyah interrupted, setting a folder on the table. I can. She flipped it open. Inside were 2 documents, a resignation letter for Daniel, and an acquisition proposal for the company. The room erupted. You're out of your mind, Daniel spat. Aaliyah didn't blink. Sign the papers, Daniel, or I release this to the press. She slid another file toward him. Daniel snatched it up, then froze. It was a record of every underhanded deal he'd made on Richard's behalf. Every lie, every theft. His hands shook. Aaliyah leaned in, her voice low. You have 30 seconds to decide. Daniel's resolve crumbled. He reached for the pen. The pen trembled in Daniel's hand as he scrawled his signature across the resignation letter. The boardroom was eerily silent, the other executives exchanging nervous glances. Aaliyah stood motionless, watching as the man who had once stolen her work now surrendered his career without a fight. When he finished, Daniel shoved the paper toward her, his voice barely above a whisper. Asterisk, happy now. Asterisk. Aaliyah didn't answer. She simply took the document and turned to the rest of the board. Effective immediately, she announced. Vance and Mercer is under new leadership. One of the older board members, a silver-haired man named Gerald Hargrove, scoffed. This is absurd. You can't just waltz in here and… I can, Aaliyah interrupted, and I am asterisk. She nodded to Marcus, who placed a tablet on the table. The screen displayed a live ticker of the company's stock still plummeting. Gerald paled. The Vance name is toxic, Aaliyah continued. By noon, every investor will be pulling out. Unless, of course, they hear that the company has been acquired by someone with clean hands. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Someone like me. A murmur rippled through the room. Another board member, a woman named Evelyn Cho, leaned forward. And what's your plan for the company, Miss Whitmore? Aaliyah met her gaze. To restore it. She pulled out a second folder, this one containing her vision for Vance and Mercer's future. No more backroom deals, no more exploitation. Just honest, ethical finance. Evelyn studied the proposal, then slowly nodded. I'm in. One by one the others followed, all except Gerald. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is a disgrace. Harrison built this company from the ground up. Aaliyah's voice turned icy. With stolen money, asterisk. Gerald's jaw clenched. You'll regret this. Before she could respond, Marcus stepped forward. Actually, Gerald, I think you will. He slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Gerald glanced at it, then froze. Aaliyah didn't need to see it to know what it was. Marcus had shown her earlier evidence of Gerald's own embezzlement, hidden under Harrison's protection. Gerald's face went ashen. Marcus smiled. Resignation or prison, your choice. The room held its breath. Then, with a shaking hand, Gerald reached for the pen. By noon, it was done. News outlets exploded with the announcement. Aaliyah Whitmore, heir to the Whitmore fortune, takes control of Vance and Mercer. Asterisk. The stock stabilized. The investors stayed. And Richard Vance? Aaliyah watched from her new office. Harrison's asterisk old offices, his mugshot flashed across the screen. Arrested for conspiracy the moment he'd tried to flee the country. Marcus knocked on the doorframe. You've got a visitor. Aaliyah turned and froze. Standing in the doorway was an elderly woman, her posture regal despite her age, her sharp eyes the same deep brown as Aaliyah's. The resemblance was unmistakable. Aaliyah's breath caught. Grandmother? Asterisk. The woman smiled. Hello, child. Marcus stepped aside as the woman entered, her cane tapping softly against the hardwood. I'd hoped this day would come. Aaliyah's mind reeled. Her parents had never spoken of any living relatives. They'd made it seem like they were alone in the world. But now here she was. Family asterisk. You knew about me? Aaliyah whispered. Of course. Her grandmother's gaze flicked to the necklace at Aaliyah's throat. I gave that to your mother the day she went into hiding. Her voice hardened. The day the Vances tried to erase us. Aaliyah's chest tightened. Why didn't she ever tell me? To protect you. Her grandmother sighed. But now? Now you're ready asterisk. Marcus cleared his throat. There's more. Aaliyah's grandmother reached into her bag and pulled out an old leather-bound ledger. Eleanor's records. Every dollar the Vances stole. Every property they seized. She handed it to Aaliyah. It's time to take it all back. Aaliyah opened the ledger and her pulse spiked. The numbers were staggering. This wasn't just about Vance and Mercer. This was about everything. Her grandmother's eyes gleamed. So, granddaughter, where do we begin? The leather-bound ledger felt heavier than it should have in Aaliyah's hands. The pages were brittle with age, the ink faded but still legible row after row of assets, properties, and investments, all meticulously documented by Eleanor Whitmore before her death. Aaliyah traced a finger down the list, her pulse quickening. This isn't just money. It's land, asterisk. Her grandmother, Lillian Whitmore, gave a slow nod from the plush chair across from the desk. Acres of it. Some of the most valuable real estate in the state. She leaned forward, her cane resting between her knees. The Vances didn't just steal our fortune, child. They stole our legacy asterisk. Marcus, standing near the floor-to-ceiling windows of Aaliyah's new office, crossed his arms. And they've been sitting on it for decades, letting it appreciate while pretending it was always theirs. Aaliyah's jaw tightened. She had known the theft was vast, but seeing it laid out like this, calculating, it made her blood burn. She snapped the ledger shut. How do we prove it's ours? Lillian smiled a sharp, knowing thing. We don't prove it. We take it. Marcus pulled a file from his briefcase and slid it across the desk. Harrison's legal team buried the ownership trails under shell companies and forged documents. But these? He tapped the file. These are the real deeds, signed by Eleanor, hidden by her lawyers before the Vances could destroy them. Aaliyah flipped through the documents. Each one bore Eleanor's elegant, looping signature, and each was tied to a property now held by the Vance family or their allies. One name jumped out at her. The Kensington. Asterisk. A luxurious high-rise in the heart of the city, one of the most coveted addresses for the elite. She had walked past it 100 times, never knowing it was hers. Asterisk. Her grip on the papers tightened. We start here. The Kensington's lobby was a study in opulence of marble floors, crystal chandeliers, a doorman in a tailored suit who eyed Aaliyah with polite skepticism as she strode in. May I help you, ma'am? Aaliyah didn't break stride. I'm here to see the building manager. The doorman hesitated. Do you have an appointment? She smiled. Number? But I do own the place. Before he could react, Marcus stepped forward, handing him a copy of the deed. The man's eyes widened. 5 minutes later, the building manager, a harried-looking man named Paulson, was sweating through his shirt as he stared at the documents spread across his desk. This can't be right, he stammered. It's very right, Aaliyah said coolly. This building was purchased by Eleanor Whitmore in 1958. The deed was stolen and the ownership records falsified. But this, she pointed to the signature, is legally binding. Paulson shook his head. Even if that's true, you can't just walk in here and… Actually, Marcus cut in, she can. We've already filed the claim with the courts. The Kensington reverts to the Whitmore estate immediately. Aaliyah leaned forward. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to gather every tenant file, every financial record, and hand them over. Today. Paulson's mouth opened, then closed. Then his phone rang. He answered it, his face draining of color as he listened. After a moment, he hung up and swallowed hard. That was the asterisk mayor's office. Asterisk. His voice was barely a whisper. They've been instructed to cooperate with you. Aaliyah arched a brow. She hadn't called the mayor. She glanced at Marcus, who gave her a faint, knowing smirk. Asterisk. Lillian's doing. Asterisk. She stood, smoothing her blazer. Good. Then let's get started. By the end of the day, the news had broken. Whitmore heiress reclaims stolen property. Kensington Tower first of many. Asterisk. The fallout was instant. Tenants panicked. Investors scrambled. And the Vance family's remaining allies? They started talking. Asterisk. Aaliyah was reviewing the Kensington's financials when Marcus burst into her office, his phone in hand. You need to see this. He turned the screen toward her. A live press conference played an elderly man in an expensive suit, his face grim as he stood at a podium. Senator James Holloway. Asterisk. A Vance family ally for decades. And he was confessing. Asterisk. Regret my role in covering up the Whitmore estate theft, he said, his voice hoarse. Harrison Vance coerced myself and others into falsifying records. I am prepared to testify. Aaliyah stared. How? Marcus grinned. Lillian called in a lot of favors. The screen cut to another news feed, another politician stepping down, then another, then a prominent banker, admitting to fraud. It was a domino effect, and Aaliyah realized with a thrill, this was just the beginning. Asterisk. Her grandmother appeared in the doorway, her cane tapping against the floor. Well, granddaughter, ready for the next one? Aaliyah stood, the ledger in her hands. Show me. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Aaliyah's penthouse apartmenta space she had claimed in the Kensington, the moment ownership was secured. The city sprawled beneath her, alive with the buzz of news vans and reporters still camped outside the building, desperate for a statement. Aaliyah ignored them. Her focus was locked on the ledger spread across the glass dining table, its pages marked with neon tabs where properties had been successfully reclaimed. The Kensington, a waterfront estate. 3 blocks of prime downtown real estate. But there were dozens more. Lillian sat across from her, sipping tea with the calm of a woman who had waited decades for this moment. "The easy ones are done," she said. "Now comes the fight." Aaliyah knew exactly what she meant. Whitmore Manor, *. The family's ancestral home-crown jewel of Eleanor's stolen legacy, currently occupied by Harrison Vance's eldest daughter, Victoria, a woman known for her viciousness and her refusal to surrender an inch of Vance power. Marcus strode in from the terrace, his phone pressed to his ear. "Good. Keep me updated." He hung up and turned to them. "The courts just froze Victoria's assets. She's barred from selling or transferring any property until the Whitmore claims are settled." Lillian smirked. "So she's trapped." Aaliyah closed the ledger. "Then let's go see her." Whitmore Manor was even more imposing in person. The iron gates were flanked by security, the sprawling grounds meticulously kept. As the black town car pulled up to the entrance, Aaliyah spotted movement in an upstairs window, a figure watching their approach. Victoria *. The front door swung open before they could knock. A stone-faced butler stood in the entryway. "Miss Vance is not receiving visitors." Marcus stepped forward. "She'll receive us *." A tense silence stretched. Then, from the shadows of the grand foyer, a voice cut through. "Let them in." Victoria Vance descended the staircase like a queen surveying peasants. Her blonde hair was pulled into a flawless chignon, her designer dress worth more than most people's rent, but her ice-blue eyes burned with pure hatred. "Aaliyah Whitmore," she sneered. "I wondered how long it would take you to slither your way here." Aaliyah held her gaze. "This isn't your home." Victoria's laugh was razor-sharp. "It's been in my family for 50 years. "Stolen," Lillian corrected, stepping forward. "By your father." "From mine *." Victoria's mask slipped for a fraction of a second, just long enough for Aaliyah to see the fear beneath the fury. Then she straightened. "You have no proof." Marcus pulled a document from his briefcase. "This is the original deed, signed by Eleanor Whitmore. Witnessed, legal *." He held it out. "The courts have already ruled in our favor. This house is ours." Victoria didn't take it. "You'll have to drag me out." Aaliyah smiled. "Gladly." She pulled out her phone and dialed. 10 seconds later, sirens wailed in the distance. Victoria's composure cracked. "You bitch!" "Sheriff's Department," Aaliyah said calmly. "Here to escort you off my property." Victoria lunged, but the butler caught her arm. "Miss Vance," he murmured. "It's over." The sirens grew louder. Victoria wrenched free, her chest heaving. "This isn't the end." Aaliyah stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Only Victoria could hear. "Number. It's just the beginning of you losing everything. *." By nightfall, the news was everywhere. Vance Harris evicted, Whitmore Manor restored to rightful owners. Photos of Aaliyah standing on the manor's front steps went viral. But the real victory came later, as Aaliyah walked through the grand halls of her family's home, her fingers trailing over dusty portraits of ancestors she'd never known. She felt it, belonging. Lillian joined her in front of the largest paintinga, stunning portrait of Eleanor Whitmore, her necklace gleaming around her throat. "Welcome home, granddaughter," Lillian whispered. Aaliyah touched the pendant at her own neck. Finally, The grand ballroom of Whitmore Manor glittered under the light of 1,000 crystals, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the hum of hushed conversations. Aaliyah stood at the top of the staircase, surveying the crowd below. Politicians, business magnates, socialites all here to witness the official return of the Whitmore family. Lillian had orchestrated tonight's gala with precision. Not just a celebration. She had said. A statement. And what a statement it was. Every major news outlet lined the perimeter, cameras flashing as Aaliyah descended the stairs in a gown of midnight blue, Eleanor's pendant resting against her collarbone. The whispers followed her like a shadow. Asterisk. Is it true she's taking the Vances to court for the rest of the fortune? I heard Harrison tried to cut a deal from prison. Look at Hirsch. Exactly like Eleanor. Aaliyah kept her expression neutral, but the words sent a thrill through her. Marcus met her at the bottom of the stairs offering a champagne flute. Nervous? She took the glass. Should I be? He smirked. Not a chance. Before she could reply, the crowd near the entrance stirred. A ripple of shock spread through the room as a familiar figure stepped inside. Richard Vance. Aaliyah's grip tightened on her glass. He looked haggard, his tailored suit hanging loose on his frame, his once polished demeanor replaced by something brittle. The whispers turned to outright gasps as he strode toward her, ignoring the stares. Marcus moved to intercept, but Aaliyah stopped him with a subtle shake of her head. Let him come. Richard stopped a foot away, his jaw clenched. Aaliyah. She arched a brow. Richard, I don't recall inviting you. A muscle in his cheek twitched. I'm here to talk. Then talk. He glanced around at the watching crowd, then lowered his voice. Not here. Asterisk. Aaliyah sipped her champagne. Here or nowhere. Richard's composure cracked. You've made your point, he hissed. You've ruined us. But this, he gestured to the gala, this is rubbing salt in the wound. Asterisk. She leaned in, her voice ablade. Good. Richard flinched. Then from behind him, a new voice cut through. Asterisk Richard. I suggest you leave. Asterisk Lillian stood there, her cane in one hand, a frosty smile on her lips. Richard's face paled. You, asterisk. Lillian's smile didn't waver. Me. For a moment, no one moved. Then Richard exhaled sharply and turned back to Aaliyah. My father wants to make a deal. Aaliyah laughed. There is no deal. You haven't even heard. I don't need to. She set her glass down on a passing tray. The only thing left for you to do is watch, as I take back everything your family stole. Richard's hands curled into fists. You'll regret this. Marcus stepped forward. Security. 2 uniformed men materialized, gripping Richard's arms. As they dragged him out, the crowd erupted in applause. Aaliyah didn't smile, because she'd seen the look in Richard's eyes as he was forced out. This wasn't over. Asterisk. Later, in the Manor's private study, Lillian poured 3 glasses of whiskey. He won't give up, she said, handing one to Aaliyah. Marcus took the other. He doesn't have a choice. The courts have ruled. The public is on our side. Lillian's gaze darkened. The Vances didn't get where they are by playing fair. Aaliyah swirled the amber liquid in her glass. Then neither will we. A knock at the door interrupted them. One of the security team stepped in. Miss Whitmore, you need to see this. He handed her a tablet. A live newsfeed played footage of Harrison Vance being released from prison on bail. Aaliyah's blood ran cold. How? Asterisk. Then the camera panned to the person standing beside him, smirking at the reporters. Daniel Reeves. Asterisk. Marcus cursed. That traitor. Asterisk. Aaliyah's grip on the tablet turned white, knuckled. Daniel met the camera's lens head-on, as if he knew exactly who was watching. This fight's just getting started. Asterisk, he said, and the screen cut to black. The screen went dark, but Daniel's smirk seemed burned into Aaliyah's vision. The study was silent except for the faint hum of the gala still echoing through the Manor's halls. Marcus was the first to speak, his voice tight with fury. Daniel must have dug up some leverage to get Harrison out. Lillian set her whiskey glass down with a sharp clink. Asterisk. Or, he fabricated it. Aaliyah stared at the blank tablet, her mind racing. Daniel had been there from the beginning, knew the company's secrets, the skeletons in every board member's closet. If he'd turned against them, it meant he'd found a bigger payout. And that made him dangerous. Asterisk. She stood abruptly. We need to move now. Marcus was already pulling out his phone. I'll call the legal team number. Aaliyah's voice cut through like steel. We don't play defense. Not anymore. Lillian's eyes gleamed. What do you propose? Aaliyah smiled. Asterisk. We end this. Asterisk. 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 48 hours later, the press conference was broadcast live, from the steps of Whitmore Manor. Aaliyah stood at the podium, flanked by Marcus and Lillian, the morning sun casting long shadows behind them. Cameras flashed as she adjusted the microphone, her voice calm but carrying the weight of finality. For decades, the Vance family built their empire on stolen wealth, she began. But today, that ends. She gestured to the massive screen behind her, where a single document was displayed, a signed confession from Harrison Vance. The crowd erupted. Reporters shouted questions, but Aaliyah continued, unshaken. Harrison Vance has admitted to his role in the theft of the Whitmore fortune. In exchange, he will surrender all remaining assets tied to our family's legacy. She paused, letting the words sink in, including his shares in Vance and Mercer. A stunned silence fell. Then, like a hammer strike, she delivered the final blow. As of today, the company will be dissolved. Its holdings will be redistributed, starting with reparations to every employee, every family, every person the Vances exploited. The uproar was instant, but Aaliyah wasn't finished. She leaned into the microphone, her gaze locking onto the camerasanto Daniel, wherever he was watching. And to those who stood with them, her voice dropped, cold and deliberate. Run. 1 month later, the headlines told the story. Harrison Vance sentenced to 20 years. Richard Vance flees country warrant issued. Daniel Reeves arrested for fraud, conspiracy. Aaliyah sat on the terrace of Whitmore Manor, the morning breeze carrying the scent of blooming gardens. The ledger lay closed on the table beside her, its purpose finally fulfilled. Marcus joined her, handing her a steaming cup of coffee. You've made a lot of powerful enemies. She took the cup, smiling. Good. Lillian appeared in the doorway, her cane tapping lightly against the stone. The first reparations checks went out this morning. Aaliyah nodded. It had been her first decree returning what she could to those hurt by the Vance's greed. Scholarships for underserved students. Grants for Black-owned businesses. A foundation in Eleanor's name to ensure nothing like this could happen again. Marcus glanced at his watch. We should go. The board is waiting. Aaliyah stood, straightening her blazer. The new board of Whitmore Holdings, a company built on justice, not theft. Lillian reached out, squeezing her hand. Eleanor would be proud. Aaliyah touched the pendant at her throat, the metal warm from the sun. Finally, she thought, we're free. And as she walked inside, the doors of Whitmore Manor stood open behind her, no longer a symbol of loss, but of legacy.